I think one of the most important, if not the most important metrics in charting your financial success is not your business profits last year, not how much money you took home, not what your margins were, but it's quite simply net worth. Not just for billionaires and celebrities, but understanding that everyone has a net worth and building towards long-term financial success. And so today I'm going to share with you 4 principles that I've determined as great ways to focus on building net worth as a nomad capitalist. Hey guys, I'm Andrew Henderson, and here at Nomad Capitalist, we encourage people to think outside of the box. If you have a business, where can you move that business to keep more of your own money, be more respected with lower taxes, fewer regulations? Where can you go and live where you feel totally at peace? Where can you go and park your money to make sure that you're protected? We call it go where you're treated best. And so those are the principles that I apply to any personal finance conversation. I always want to go where I'm treated best. And so there's 4 things that I've thought about within that framework that I think are important for the successful entrepreneurs and investors that we talk to here on the channel and that we work with in our business. And the first thing that really comes to mind when it comes to building net worth to me is you want it to be sustainable. I see a lot of folks out there who take huge risks. For me, one of the biggest risks is they go out and they borrow a lot of money. They put a lot of money in their credit card building their business, or I had a business partner long ago when we were making a business investment, and he wanted to grow the company by acquiring other businesses with debt, and I just felt very uncomfortable with that. There are many other types of risk, and you can determine risk for yourself. I mean, for me, a risk is going and working a 9-to-5 job. For me, risk is keeping all of my eggs in one country's basket. Some people might say investing all of your money in cryptocurrency is risk. You may not think that's risky because you understand it. So everyone gets to define their own risk. But for me, what I want with net worth is sustainability. And so when I look at the culture where I come from in the United States, I see a lot of people, taking on debt. Businesses take on huge amounts of debt. You see often ebbs and flows in the market. I lived in California and Arizona during the last Great Recession, and I watched as housing prices in Las Vegas, also nearby where we did a lot of business, went sky high and then fell through the floor. I mean, imagine before the Great Recession, houses in the middle of an open desert 2 hours outside of Los Angeles sold for $500,000, $600,000, and then became ghost towns. Right? So what I look at is how can I build a net worth in a sustainable way? If I were a stock, I would want to be a growth and income stock, just slow and steady gains. Okay? Now, the faster you can increase those annual gains, that's cool, as long as it's sustainable. I don't want huge ups and then huge downs, huge ups and then huge downs. I like for things to be sustainable. And so by controlling more of the variables, by controlling the tax rate you pay, by not living in a country that has a wealth tax or is threatening to impose a wealth tax that could eat away and make it more difficult to have sustainable wealth, by being diversified around the world, and by making investments in things that are not risky, you can be a lot more sustainable. When I look at markets, people have either cheered or jeered at the fact that I promoted Cambodia for a number of years. You look at a chart of Cambodia since the end of the Khmer Rouge. You go back to the mid-90s, and you look at just kind of slow, steady growth. All right? And so that's a market that is just one example, is less correlated to all the risky stuff that's out there. And part of it is there's really not a lot of access to debt financing, right? People are coming in and putting cash, and they have to consider the fundamentals. And it's much, you have to really think long term, and you have to think, this is where my money's going. And, where a lot of us come from in the West, people just, make these spur of the moment decisions, not on important stuff that actually helps them, but like emotional stuff like, this is our dream home, let's buy it right now, who cares, take out a bigger mortgage, call the loan officer, get a bigger loan, even if it's half of our income. That's not sustainable, okay? So tip number 1 for me is analyzing what's happening in your country, in your culture, both politically, the tax situation, the financial situation. Are there good investments there? Is it sustainable? I think a lot of Western countries are not. That's why, the United States has 20-some trillion dollars in debt. Not sustainable, right? Meanwhile, countries like Singapore, no net debt. Right? So there's a difference in culture that I think you have to consider. And this is why you got to get outside the box in your own country to think, is this really the best place for me to be? That's step one. Step two to think about really is the compounding effect. And so what's fun for me is we get folks sometimes that come through, guys who are 23, 25, 26 years old who are making a lot of money. Had a gentleman recently, he makes about $1.5 million a year. I think he's 24 years old, right? And I said to him, I said, listen, you've got this successful business. Now his particular business, I don't know if it's the kind of thing that's gonna run for generations. He might have a great 5 to 10 year business by his own admission. But I said, listen, you're making $1.5 million a year. You're paying hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes. I don't remember the exact number. I said, imagine for the next decade, from 24 to 34, you're a young guy. You go overseas, right? You get that tax bill down to practically nothing. You've got an extra, let's call it $500,000 a year that you can put into your investments and creating your sustainable net worth. So $500,000 times 10, just with zero growth, $5 million. Now imagine you invested that even relatively conservatively. Okay, what would that be worth at 34? Then imagine the business fizzles out, or you sell it, or whatever. You're 34 years old, right? You've got your whole life ahead of you. But you've had some of the most important 10 years of your life compounding. This is why I think, number one, it's worth starting a small business when you're young and building that into a bigger business. But it's also the best time to go offshore and practice the kind of offshore tax strategies that we talk about because, I had another gentleman recently and his wife, they're in their 60s, right? And for them, it's much more about defense, okay? Taxes are kind of down the list for them because they understand they're not going to have as much time to compound. They're looking at protecting their wealth, they're looking at avoiding possible wealth taxes or wealth grabs or bank failures or bail-ins or whatever. They've got a different perspective, okay? They're more defensive. But if you're young, you've got to recognize the impact of compounding interest. Everyone says they know compounding interest, but then they live in a country where they give half of their salary, half of their business profits away to the government and say, hey, I'm a smart guy with compounding interest. Well, you would realize that over the course of your lifetime, had you lowered your tax rate from 40 or 50% to 5% and invested the difference, not even considering maybe the cost of living where you might go is lower, or you could hire lower priced staff or find other cost efficiencies, that's just gravy. If you just did the 40 or 50% to 5% gain and invested the rest, we're talking millions and probably tens of millions of dollars over your lifetime, especially if you start earlier. So you really have to pay attention to compounding interest because most people, again, when they're starting their businesses, they're wasting a lot of money. Taxes, cost of living, high cost of operating. So focus on compounding. So point 3 is tax savings. This dovetails, of course, with point number 2. But what's interesting to me is I always put it in perspective. Someone comes to me and says, I'm paying $250,000, $500,000, $1 million a year in taxes, whatever it may be. I say to myself, that's a lot of money because when you compound it, it's going to be really a very significant way to increase your net worth and even create generational wealth. But to the government, $250,000 is nothing. That's like they host a party at one of their big embassies and they spend it on nice food and getting the gang together. And so if you can put that money back to work for you, you are going to be able to have a tremendous advantage over everyone else. I will see guys who come in, they are 7-figure earners. They are, let's say my age, mid-30s. And we'll go over for tax purposes, what's your net worth? We've shared the example before of someone who lives in their country. They were born there, they grew up there, it's all they know. And their goal is to keep up with the Joneses, right? So maybe they make $300,000 a year, which is a pretty good salary for most people. But then they give, 40 or 50% of the salary away. And then because they have the job, they need to drive this certain car to the job, and then they need to buy the home in the certain neighborhood because they're expected to entertain. And then they marry the girl who, okay, there's a certain way we should be doing things, and then she needs a Range Rover, and then the kids need to go to a certain school. And, we're not eating at McDonald's, so, we need to get the nice foods, and everything needs to be a certain way because, oh, by the way, that's what everyone else down the street is doing. And we kind of surround ourselves in this environment where we're forced to keep up at a certain level, not only with taxes, but with all of our cost of living. And lo and behold, that $300,000 turns into $0 pretty quick. And so you're not building net worth if you're saving $0, right? You're maybe depending on the government to build your net worth by giving you a pension check, by giving you a social security check when you're 67 years old, but then they're in control. What I love about net worth is you're in control, right? A salary, that can go away. Business profits, businesses come and go, but net worth is always there for you. And so for me, understanding that things are fleeting at times, save as much cash as you can to put into your coffers and grow your net worth more sustainably. Don't be the people who live in their own little bubble of all I know is Denmark, all I know is New York, all I know is Sydney, and therefore I'm just going to go out and live this lavish life in that place. I'm going to invest in that place. I'm going to get bad investment returns. I'm going to pay way too much in taxes. I'm going to overpay for kids' school. I'm going to buy these overpriced foods that I could get somewhere else for more affordably. And so if you do that, don't be surprised when you have no net worth. For me, it's all about thinking outside of the box, and most people don't do that. So point number 4, the last point, I think is really the most important one that supports point 1 through 3. And that is, when you do it, you'll feel it. Let me explain what I mean. I had a gentleman recently, and what's been interesting in working with folks who are decamillionaires, centimillionaires, and even above, is you watch how many of them did grow their net worth sustainably. It just happened over time. I've had a couple guys, I had the founder of $1 billion company, just kind of shot through the roof in the crypto space. But for the most part, these guys who are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, it's just, slow and steady, and now they have $80 million. And one of these guys had this beautiful sports car. I don't know anything about cars, but I guess it was a pretty expensive, $1 million car or something like that. And he said, I always was interested in cars from a young age, but he said, I never really made the car the goal. I was never focused on that. I was just going out, doing my business, focusing on my money, trying to find all the advantages I could. And just when I had the money, I felt to myself, he said, I woke up one day and said, now I can afford the car. It wasn't like the goal every day where he put the car on the board and he was looking at it, and the moment he has enough money, he buys it. What I found is, until you do steps 1 through 3, you won't know how you're going to react. And one day, you'll find out that because you stopped giving the government 50% of your money and you went somewhere where you could be treated best, when you started treating net worth as the most important thing, you're going to have more money. And you're probably not even going to know what to do with it. And you're going to say to yourself, do I want a yacht? Do I want the $1 million car? You'll have to figure that out. But you don't know until you get there. This is what I always tell people about the nomad capitalist lifestyle. People have so many preconceived notions. You're not going to know what you're going to feel until you're going to get there. And listen, I'll be honest. What we do, living overseas and living a nomad capitalist lifestyle is not for everyone. And some people will start it and they'll want to go back, and that's fine. It's not as if you saved only a couple $100,000 and then went back. You really lost out, right? Nothing's permanent. But when you have the extra money from doing these steps, you're going to be a totally different person. You're going to take a totally different approach. One thing that I've seen, again, with people who are very, very successful is they've realized there's no need to cut corners. It's always interesting watching people who are sometimes just starting out in business, and they're looking for every angle and every edge, and almost occasionally, I see someone who's who can I screw over kind of thing. It's that's the only way to get ahead. That's such a small-minded way to build a net worth, and that's why most of those guys who have these kind of flash in the pan, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year businesses never build sustainable net worth, because it is about keeping up with the Joneses. It is about finding an angle, right? And yet the people with the huge fortunes just realize, I can just do things sustainably. So those are 4 things that I want you to keep in mind. For me, it's the hustler versus builder paradigm. Nothing wrong with starting a business that brings in a whack of cash for 3 years and then you go and do the next thing. Nothing wrong with that at all. But the mindset for me is long-term, net worth, building, sustainable, and then making sure you keep the net worth. Making sure you don't put it all in one bank and it fails. Making sure you don't put it all in one stock and it fails. For me personally, I'm all for crypto. I'm not putting every dime I have in cryptocurrency. I'm just not going to do it, right? And I've seen people become incredibly wealthy with cryptocurrency. Some of them do have huge crypto positions, and so maybe they know more about it than I do, and they feel comfortable with that. But for me, I've also seen people, by the way, that it's $10 million and it's $3 million of their 10, and that is probably a lot more diversified. So these are the things that I want you to think about. How do you grow your net worth? How do you keep your net worth? How do you grow sustainably? The stuff we talk about at Nomad Capitalist, in my opinion, helps you do that a lot more easily than staying in one place and doing what you're told. How can Nomad Capitalist help you? 4 ways. Number 1, subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell to make sure you get our new video every day. Number 2, get a copy of Nomad Capitalist, the book. You'll learn a lot of my personal experiences over a dozen years of studying this stuff, as well as exactly some of the strategies that you can use to build your Nomad Capitalist plan. Number 3, if you're not sure where to start, but you want to come and learn from my team and I, you want to come and mingle with like-minded people, learn more about our live conference, Nomad Capitalist Live. It's coming up soon. And number 4, if you want some help right now because you've got a burning issue, you need something solved, you want to lower your taxes, get a second passport, or build the Nomad Capitalist lifestyle of your dreams, go to nomadcapitalist.com and click on Become a Client.